You're in the water loop.
Waterloop. Hi, this is Travis with Waterloop. Water conservation is very important to me, and I bet it is to all of you. That's why I have High Sierra shower heads in my house, and I'm so happy that they're a supporter of this podcast. High Sierra carries the EPA WaterSense label for efficiency and uses 40% less water than conventional low-flow shower heads. The model I have uses just 1.5 gallons per minute. And because of their unique nozzle design, it's patented. Nobody else has it. It maximizes efficiency of water and energy and does not compromise on performance. You still get a powerful shower. Use promo code WATERLOOP for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com.
Waterloop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis, joined from Philadelphia by Howard Neukrug. He is the executive director of the Water Center at the University of Pennsylvania. Howard, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Travis. This is great.
Yeah, it's good to
welcome being here.
Good to be connected. I've watched your work and known about you and everything since back in my days. I was at EPA in DC and all that, and you've been very active in the Philly area, doing a lot for a long time. We'll dive into that in a minute, but why is there always so much water news out of the Philly area? It's like this center of thought and innovation and people just being so proactive on water.
It's so funny, Travis, that you asked me that question, because I was in Singapore and I was meeting with Peter Ng, who's the CEO of Singapore PUB, their water wastewater utility. And I said, Peter, how come you are so innovative? And his response was, Howard, if you had no water, you'd be innovative too. So we have water, but we also have pollution, and we have an old system. And I don't think we have a choice but to be innovative, especially if you want to do things that are within an economic value that is affordable to the people of Philadelphia and the region. And I don't mean to speak disparagingly about Philadelphia. This is true, as I'm finding all over the country and all over the world.
Very interesting. And it seems like all the different facets of society in the Philly area are involved. You have the utilities, obviously, you've got the universities, you've got NGOs, you've got foundations, and it's like so much effort put into things there. What's the Philly waterscape like, for people that might not be familiar with the waterways, the pollution situation, and the different big players?
Well, it's interesting. I just read this great book, and I'm using it for my class. It's called Great Cities, Great Water, and it's by a guy named Carl Smith. And he talks about, he's using 3 cities and the history of their water systems. And it's Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia. And you look at this and you just go, wow, what an incredible story, and how different each of these 3 cities during the same era of the mid-1800s approached their water issues. And unfortunately for Philadelphia, it did not follow the pattern of, let's say, a New York City, which was to grab hold of a water system, a watershed upstate, and make it into a protected area. In Philly, we have run of river. So we take what comes downstream. We're at the down end of the Delaware River and the Schuylkill, which is the largest tributary to the Delaware. After us, after it leaves the Philadelphia area, where it's really going into the Delaware estuary, Delaware Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean, you have a very large amount of commerce. You have industrial pollution from the turn of the century. We have just about everything. And we've prided ourselves for years, really through the whole 20th century, in our ability to treat anything. And that was our innovations were really like, how do we always provide high quality, safe drinking water for Philadelphians, using our own technologies and tweaking them and understanding. So we've always had that urge to investigate further. Of course, as we moved into the late tell me if I'm going too far, but you got
Oh, no, go for it. Yeah.
In the late 1950s, and certainly in 1972, the Clean Water Act, and 74, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and this really special thing that happened that I call the big change for the U.S. in water, which was the last time the federal government supplied federal funding, significant federal funding into the water business, was with the Construction Grants Program of the Clean Water Act. And between the 1980 and the year 2000, everything changed. Everything changed about what was considered quality treatment, what was considered acceptable and reachable in the rivers and streams. And it's been really miraculous. And I hope the federal government takes this on again, because there is real hope for big change yet to come in the water, wastewater, stormwater business and our rivers and streams if the funding's there. And funding seems to turn out to be the whole big crux of the problem.
But I know that everybody that's in the water sector is constantly telling the federal government and all levels of government, elected officials, like, look at the return on investment. If you invest in water, what comes back to communities, to quality of life, to public health, to local economies. I mean, it's really just the projects themselves are incredible economic drivers, and everybody's been yelling that for a while, to Congress. And so there's an opportunity there. Hopefully something happens. One of the other things that I think Philly's really known for is its push on green infrastructure. It's been more aggressive on that front than any other city in the country, really. Why is that, and how's that gone?
That is a very, very special story and near and dear to my heart, because it was the mid-'90s, and I was trying to figure out how do you take the utility to the next level. And this is and today we're still doing these kinds of things. We're calling them utility of the future, and we're working on renewable resources and so forth. But it was the mid-'90s, and I worked for a utility that was a drinking water utility, a wastewater utility, and a stormwater utility. But they were all together. I mean, there was only one boss, but they were very siloed, and they were siloed because Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act was siloed, EPA became siloed, and then the state DEPs became siloed, and then the utilities approached this from a very siloed perspective. We had experts in each, and I wanted to start to bring them together. And I was working on different ways of thinking about it, and came up with. It wasn't mine originally, of course, because people have been doing this for 100 years. We called it back then total water management. It's now called integrated water management. The newest term is One Water. It's all the same thing. It's all about how do you connect everything together? And the very first step, which is thanks to EPA and work that happened under the last administration, the concept of being able to take just two simple things, wet weather from combined sewers and wet weather from separate sewers, and be able to, when a city's planning on how to manage these old systems that weren't designed exactly the way they need to be today. How do you spend your money? How do you prioritize? And allowing the integration of those two systems and the integration of the money you're going to spend on those in order to get the best return. And so we were looking at that in the 1990s, and came up with this idea of Office of Watersheds, and went around. I had business cards made up. It took about 2 years with my commissioner at the time, who said, "Howard, I really like this idea, but it's a little vague. It's a little fuzzy. What exactly are you going to do?" And I didn't know, but I just knew it was the right approach to take. And so I had the cards made up. Howard Neukrug, director of the Office of Watersheds, and I started handing them out to people. And Travis, do you know what people ask me?
What's a watershed?
Yes, what's a watershed? It was 1998, 1999, and the common You didn't learn this in school, and people did not really know what a watershed was. And you think about that today in 2020 and how much progress we've made and how silly it is, even if I go to a fifth grader, talk about watersheds, to think that they may not understand what that means. So anyway, we put together our drinking water source program, source protection program, which we hadn't had prior to that. We brought together our combined sewer overflow program, our stormwater program. And we started having all these folks, and public affairs, of course, and we started to have all these folks work together in the same office. Wow. And it was 2 years. One of the smartest people in the water industry is this guy named Chris Crockett. He was my deputy for any number of years, and now works at Essential Utilities. And hi, Chris. He, again, the smartest guy in the industry. And in 2001 or so, he came running into my office and said, Howard, I finally understand why you have the CSO director sitting next to the source water protection director. I get it.
Right.
But it did take time to understand that the two industries, the two separate issues are very separate. Are very separate, but they are the same. It's all about water. Water is the universal connector.
Sure. So a few years ago, after all your time at Philadelphia Water, you transitioned over to become the executive director of the Water Center at University of Pennsylvania. Was that 2 years ago, a year ago, right in that?
No, I left in 2016. I left with my Mayor Nutter, at the end of his administration.
Okay.
After 38 years with Philly Water.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Time to leave.
So yes. How has that transition been for you?
Now it's great. It was a nightmare for me for the first 2 years, trying to understand. I thought I was just going to go to this university, and I knew all the bureaucracy because I grew up in city government. So what could possibly be harder? Well, at the academic world's a little bit harder with the bureaucracy, and it's very different. It's the rules and challenges are very different than government bureaucracies, and so it took a long time to figure this out. And again, fuzzy, vague. What are you going to do? Fuzzy, vague. I came to Penn because Penn offered me the opportunity to start a water center at the university. And Penn, I know, has so many incredibly brilliant people from all different areas of whether you go to Wharton or the engineering school, law school, or just the arts and sciences groups. There's so much knowledge there, so many brilliant people. And there was very little water work coming out. Water was not a focus of the university. And being a graduate of that school, and with all this water knowledge that I had, I wanted to change that. I wanted to make Philadelphia a hub for research and education and work with, because it's not just Philly. It's our Philadelphia region. It goes up to New York City, down to Washington D.C. It's got the big public utilities, and for those cities, and Baltimore, shouldn't leave out Baltimore, and also the privates. Essential Utilities, one of the biggest, American Water, one of the biggest, and Suez, again, one of the biggest, all in the within 50, 100 miles of Philadelphia.
Exactly. That point again. There's so much water brain power in that greater Philly region. It's unbelievable. So the Water Center. What is the Water Center? What are your focus areas? What are you doing there?
Oh, that was my first problem, because my idea was that I would just continue all the different things I was doing at Philly Water and all the things I learned, and start to develop research activities based on that. And it became too broad and too big. So we started thinking about, we know we want to do applied research. We're not doing the academic research because that's not me. That's not my background. That's not where I think the help is needed within the water industry today. I think it's all about how do you apply science, technology, and policy to help solve the real problems on the ground, principally in the U.S., but also globally. Okay, so we've taken that position, and we went out there and started looking at my first project that we had at the Water Center was came from the Mott Foundation through friends at the Mayor's Innovation Program, and Satya, who ran that MIP program, is now the mayor of Madison, Wisconsin. Hi, Satya, and she understood very well the politics of government, and she called on me because I understood utilities, and we got some funding from the Mott Foundation to look at 5 cities and examine them in the Midwest, and to examine them and compare it to Flint. Are there more Flints out there? Was basically the project. So we got it was really a nice partnership. It was the politics, community, and the water system, and we went out there and we'd go on tours of the facilities and speak to different levels of management, and it was very interesting, and it was very uplifting in seeing the incredible people who work in the water business throughout the Midwest and throughout the world, and how passionate and experienced they are. And it was also very sad because everywhere we went, we saw that there were, while some things are very innovative and very good, there were other things that were not so good. And in different cities, there was different issues.
So what was the answer to that question? Are there more Flints out there? Obviously, lead. There's lead pipes all over the country, millions of them, right? And they are kept at bay, if you will, through corrosion control and other stuff. Flint, there's a lot of circumstances that played into that, budget constraints and emergency managers and people that didn't understand really how to deal with water, and kind of turning a blind eye and putting their head in the sand, all that kind of stuff. But what did you all find when you looked to see if other cities were in the same situation or could stumble into that?
I found that basically, one of the things that we looked at was the report card that American Society of Civil Engineers puts out every year, or every 2 years, looking at the water systems, and they gave us a D+. And now that I'm in an academic setting, I started to think about what does that even mean, and I started to make my own scale of what's an A+, and what's an F. So Flint, during their crisis, was an F. They failed. Okay. And a D to me is just above that. You're almost failing. You could fail. Hopefully you don't, and you stay above that. So a D+ is like pretty close to failure. And I started looking at what an A+ is. Innovative utility that has protected sources and modern treatment, wastewater treatment, and doesn't have flooding. and doesn't and no one had it. And then I asked my friend George Hawkins from DC Water, said, well, where would you? And I showed him the whole scale with the descriptors next to it, and I said, you got to be an A utility. And he looked at it and said, no, we're innovative in some areas, and we're doing really, really well, but we have some other areas that are still a little soft. I'd give us a B- C+.
Wow.
And then you start thinking about, you start looking at, the U.S. water systems from that kind of perspective, of from the professional perspective, looking in and understanding how it is the essential workers, it is the experts, the guys and women who've been there for 30 years, who are really keeping the water flowing and flowing well in the United States. And we've had very few Flints. And I think my message is to help reverse that so that does not happen again.
Sure. Well, you mentioned this applied science, and you mentioned research and kind of the urban area. So urban water research is this focus. Why is that so urgently needed right now?
It's needed because of all the things, some of the things that we've already talked about, but it's, the very base issue is the aging infrastructure, is the fact that in the United States, except for the newest cities, the most modern cities, the richest cities in the U.S., the water systems are 100 years old, sometimes 150 years old. And, we're using, the last time in Philadelphia that the drinking water technology was changed was the 1950s. And you go across the country, you see these same rapid sand filtration plants all over. And they're all great, but they're all getting old. And there's a big question about what do you do next. And you see that everywhere. And there's deferred maintenance that's happened that everyone knows about.
Sure. Didn't I see a story within the past year or so about wooden pipes being unearthed in the Philly area? Is that right?
Yes, people love that. People love that. The wood. You mentioned wood pipes, and I have one. You can't see it. It's when you leave as commissioner from Philly Water, you get a clock that's made out of an old wood pipe. Certainly, I mean, there was when the systems were first built in Philadelphia in the 1850s. It was mostly 1820s. It was all trees that were hollowed out and made into pipes, and there was a little leakage going on, but also they were very strong and very good. And as long as they were kept wet, which they were, they lasted. And the interesting thing that people in the business know is that when you go and you do a water main relay, you're not removing the old pipe. You're leaving it there on the ground and you're building a new pipe next to it. And that's true with the cast iron pipes that everyone's been replacing, but there's also true with the wood pipe. So you see a lot of stories about people unearthing wood pipe, and the one in Philadelphia was not in service. It was just one of those pipes, and if one wanted to unearth wood pipes, you could probably look through some historical documents and be able to find them all over the older cities of the U.S.
Oh, very, very interesting. You talked a bit about why watershed management is important. Another thing I noticed that you all talk about at the Water Center is stakeholder engagement. And I wanted to hear kind of why that's important and what you're looking at on that front.
Oh my gosh. And so much has changed in the last couple of months. COVID, the economics, and then George Floyd. I mean, oh my gosh. And the, introspection of oneself, of who they are, what they're doing, what systemic racism, what internal racism have I without knowing, and everyone else. And you look at this and say, you look at diversity, the inclusion, the equity issues, and I'm really glad because the last couple of years, most of the projects worked on included very much issues of equity and affordability within how do you run a water system, how do you deal with the issue that everyone has the human rights to water, and what do you do with people who can't afford to pay, and all those issues. But now we're going to take that even a step further, and we're talking about that internally now, is how you do that. But very much it's about the stakeholders. It's about understanding that water is global, but solutions to water is very local. It's very, one of the reasons why there's still so many issues is because every community, whether it's a community of 100 people or 1 million people, have a series of their own unique issues with their own set of unique solutions that need to go with it. Nothing is more important than making sure that, especially if you're from the University of Pennsylvania and you're working, let's say, in an area like Pittsburgh or wherever, or Flint, that you first understand and respect the community, who's out there, what they want, what are their priorities, and how much of what you're doing fits their priorities, and how do you make this all work together. And that becomes a really critical element in all this, because whatever you do, you're spending a lot of money, and you're focusing an awful lot of attention on one thing, and you have to always wonder whether it's the right thing. I was at a groundbreaking, this commissioner of Philly Water, of a vacant lot that we turned into a rain garden with a gazebo and a mural, and it was really beautiful. And it cost $500,000. We fixed up the rec center next door. Also, we had money from EPA put in 150,000. We put in, the affiliate water put in 150,000, and a nonprofit put in 150,000. And I got up there and I started being heckled by the community. And there were so many things that I learned at that moment.
Wow.
One was that the block captains who we've been working with, nobody liked them. No, they were not really speaking for the community. And that's who we've been talking to for the previous year and a half before we did this project. And the people that were speaking up were saying, look around. We have kids that were afraid to let them go to school in the morning, to get on the school bus. We don't know if they're going to come back. This vacant lot was filled with drug people. How are you going to keep the drug people away now? And all these things. They said, it's wonderful that you guys have spent $500,000 in our community, and we're not begrudging you that. But if you just asked us, what could you do with that $500,000? There'd be so many different answers. And so, from a community standpoint, how do you balance that with our direct? Because we have very specific directives of Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, consent orders, and this and that. And meanwhile, you're working in communities that have their own set of issues and their own set of priorities, and they may seem different, like crime or education, policing, race, jobs, poverty. I mean, all these things. But if you want to be successful in the water world, you got to understand how water fits into that. And that's why I think I never answered your question before about green infrastructure. That's where green infrastructure really comes in, because that is very much a utility community effort. And if the utility goes in, we learn these lessons too, and makes changes in the community. You got to make sure that you're following what the community wants. So you have to be able to hire people from the community who can help educate and facilitate discussions among the neighbors and understand what the options are. And you need to hire people from the community who are going to actually do the work, design the work, do the work, maintain, operate the systems after they're built. And it's all continuum that we have not yet perfected in Philly or anywhere, as far as I know, but is something that we all need to be continually aware of and move towards.
Yeah, well, that's a really powerful and perfect example, that story you just told, to illustrate why stakeholder engagement is so important and needs to be expanded and enriched, definitely. Turning a bit to faculty and staff of the Water Center, could you talk about kind of the team that you have there and how they contribute to the work that's going on?
Yes, it's. I hired my first employee 2 years ago, and she was a student of mine, and we brought her on full time. And since then, we now have a staff of 6 full-time employees, and plus we have 3 or 4 senior advisors who are helping us, and we have a couple of senior fellows, and so we're growing our team now. But I'd say right now we're our universe is about 18 people or so. As we start to look at our people we're bringing in to support us in different projects. It's a wonderful mix of students, recent grads, people who've been in the fields like myself for years, who have retired, and my director of research, he was, he worked for years in risk management and finished his career at a major insurance company running their global risk management operations. He decided that was too much because of the travel, et cetera, and he decided to retire at an earlier age and come to Penn and get a master's in environmental studies degree, and then figure out what he wants to do. And I caught him pretty early on and brought him into our group, and now he's one of our top leaders, of course, and coming from a very different perspective, but loving water. All of a sudden, you somehow, for whatever reason, people get passionate about water. But so he took all this knowledge that he had from this totally different business,
Yeah.
and has applied it to water, and it's really remarkable to see what he's done with it. And the same with my chief operations officer, who she was in pharmaceuticals, also change of career, into middle age, and starting to go. She went back to school and went to Penn, get her MES degree, and I met her for the first time when she was just graduating, and she wanted to ask me some questions about her capstone, which is like a thesis, and just really struck very well, and brought her on too. So our leadership team has many years of experience, and that's really helped because it's hard to start something new with no funding, with very little funding, and to grow it and to get a reputation and to move forward. And we've been very fortunate from foundations, and we're mostly getting our money from philanthropies, including including the Heinz Foundation and William Penn Foundation. Yeah,
it's good for water to have people come in from other fields and other disciplines that have a different perspective, a different way of thinking, and that helps fuel the innovation and creativity that's kind of needed for sure. So you all do projects and research. I want to ask about that in a second, but the students, there's also kind of there's like a curriculum that's out there that students can take and kind of be part of the Water Center through that.
Yes, and thank you, because I have not yet mentioned like one of the most important and vital things of all this, which is the next generation water leaders. It's who are they? Where are they? And when I started teaching, I've been teaching at Penn for a dozen years or so. So I was doing it when I was at Philly Water, and about 6 years ago, I got an email from this young woman who had taken my class and was now working for Suez in Paris. And
not bad.
6-month internship. Yeah. Right. 6-month internship. That was a start. And she wrote to me, she said, "Howard, thank you. I knew when I went to college that I can become a lawyer. I can become an engineer. I can become a professor, but I never knew I could become a water professional." Just never even. So
that's the best.
It is. It's the best. And what I'm seeing happen with the Water Center is very much more and more people are recognizing this as a industry, as a profession, where they can make money, follow their passion, use their expertise, and hopefully change the world a little bit.
And I think that's one thing that's really popular with younger people. You can't just say millennials anymore. You have to say Generation Z too, right? A lot of them are looking for a way to make an impact and make a difference, not just get a check. And I think that's the appeal of water, is it's so important in so many ways. So what are some classes that you teach, or that are part of the Water Center curriculum, if you will?
Sure. I started off teaching a course called Green City Clean Water, which was easy for me to teach because I was doing it at Philadelphia Water. And I've evolved that class over time. It's now called the role of cities, the role of water in creating sustainable and resilient cities. Okay. And so it's very much a lot of things that we've talked about. And I also teach a course on the U.S. and global water industry in the 21st century. And I just did this special little summer course on this, on the history of water in 3 cities and how that reflects on today. And it was quite interesting to see some of the things that have not changed since that time, and who is making the decisions at that time, and who makes the decisions today about water systems.
Yeah. Last thing I just wanted to ask you is, again, on that projects and research, you mentioned kind of one of the early ones. Are there some other favorites that have happened in the past couple of years that you'd like to talk about or mention?
Yeah, well, I work in Pittsburgh and with the Heinz Foundation, and they've really given us a lot of latitude. I've worked with the Heinz Foundation in the past, so that's how they knew of us, and they also liked the idea of an outside entity coming in and helping the environmental organizations in the 10 county Southwest Pennsylvania region. How do they work together? How do they form a network of environmental organizations focused on water issues, and how do they support each other? So we've been, through coronavirus, we've been using a great process of Zoom with some great support from some people who really understood how to convert the knowledge from, convert the conversation from a room full of people to using breakout groups and things like that. And we'll have a lot of support in this whole effort of trying to see how do you go to that next level? How do you bring people together and educate them and work together? How do you create a vision? One of the problems with Pittsburgh is there's no general vision of what should be with the three rivers. And and when we went to EPA, because you were at EPA, and I was asking them what they're doing in Pittsburgh. Well, we're doing a consent order. Pittsburgh.
That's the solution. Yeah.
And they say we would love to work in Pittsburgh, but the Chesapeake has a plan. We know what they want from us. The Delaware has a plan. The Susquehanna has a plan. We know what they want. There is no real plan for the three rivers. And so using that very much as a hallmark of where I hope we're headed here is to create that vision of this incredible space that has so much water. And with that, we're also doing helping them with data management, centralizing the data from the Allegheny and the Mon and the Ohio rivers, and working with them to identify the next generation water leaders, environmental leaders, and helping them understand leadership and politics. And we're also working individually in small cities. We're in one right now. We're about to approach a second. We're hoping to do 3 or 4 or 5 different small townships, some with dilapidated sewer systems, some with drinking water quality problems, all with very little money, and all with people living on the margins. And how do you correct that? And so far, we're seeing you have to correct it one-on-one. But I'm hoping that between the work that a lot of good folks are doing now across the country, that we'll figure out on a larger, more wholesale basis, how do you help all these small systems out there?
Yeah, very, very interesting. It's there's so many NGOs, there's so many environmental groups everywhere, right? And they're all kind of doing their own thing. And yeah, I imagine if they can kind of come together and get that synergy and leverage their resources and contacts and everything. I know, like in the Chesapeake, there's so many NGOs, and a number of years ago they Choose Clean Water Coalition formed, I think, and they kind of serve as a hub for a lot of NGOs to kind of get some collective direction going. So I look forward to hearing the vision that comes about for that region and following up on it.
Sure.
Well, Howard, I'm glad we caught up. I appreciate it. I hope post coronavirus to swing through Philly and see the river and come by the water center. But I appreciate your time so much.
Sure. It's good talking to you. And, if you ever want to give me a call without the microphones on, and be happy to talk to you further.
All right. Thanks, Howard.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.
The Waterloop podcast is brought to you by High Sierra Showerheads, the smart and stylish way to save water, energy, and money while enjoying a powerful shower. Use promo code Waterloop for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com.
You're in the water loop.